Good evening, gentlemen. I am going to talk to you on a military matter now, and I am going to talk to you about the Battle of the Bulge. This is a famous battle. In fact, you can call it the last thrust of Hitler. But let's look at it. Now, I am not going to discuss the conduct of the battle, the dates it started and what happened during the battle. I am going to discuss the concepts which Hitler had in his mind and whether they were correct or not. In other words, I am going to get an end result analysis of the battle. Now, the Battle of the Bulge took place in the winter of 1944. At that time, Germany was hard pressed from the Russian front, and the Americans were also moving in. Of course, there was a bit of fighting on the Russian front, no holds barred, and the best of the German divisions were facing the Russians. Hitler was in his lair, that famous place called the Wolf's Lair, where he went in Dresdenberg, where he was holed up with his friends, with his colleagues, with his followers, his yes men, and he had just recovered from the assassination attempt in July 44. So he was looking forward to a last coup de grace in which he could set the Allies back, prolong the war, and maybe win it. Because one thing a commander must always remember is that he must never lose sight of the fact that he is going to win the war. Until the end, Hitler was thinking he'll win the war. In December of that year, he decided to make a wonderful thrust. If you look at the plan, I'll tell you what it is. It was to be a thrust into France, across the Alps from the Ardennes, and then move across Germany, up north, and capture the port of Antwerp. What would have happened then? The Allies' supply line would have been disrupted, and the two American armies would have been divided. And this would give an excellent chance to Hitler to strike back. The plan, in my view, was very sound, and it relied on one very great imponderable, and that is Hitler had to keep it secret from the Allies in particular, because he was going to strike in the American sector, because the Germans always felt the Americans were the soft belly of the Allies. So this was the problem. Field Marshal von Rundstedt was called in, and a military conference took place in Dresdenberg, and the plan was put forward. Ultimately, Hitler had his way. It was Hitler's plan, Hitler's brainchild, and I've told you what the plan was: to go and make a thrust in the Ardennes and capture Antwerp, and at the same time divide the Western Allies force into two. And had he succeeded, the American army across the Rhine would have been destroyed, and so would have been the British. But well, gentlemen, what actually happened was a little different, because Hitler had also relied on the fact that in winter in the Alps there is snow, thunderstorm and hail, and visibility is poor. And for days on end, as per the report of the meteorologist which was with him, showed that there would be a blanket cover. That is what he relied on, the blanket cover. So the Allied reconnaissance planes couldn't take off to find out the German build-up. And it's a credit to the Germans that they were able to amass nearly 2,000 Panzer tanks in that region, with hundreds of fighter aircraft, and God forbid if they had won, it would have been a different story altogether. So during this period in December, Hitler launched his assault. He ordered the assault. At the same time, he was sitting in his headquarters in Dresdenberg to view what is happening. Well, gentlemen, as I've already told you, the plan was pretty sound, which I've already explained to you. But it relied on two imponderables, and that was the weather being the main course. and the second was the Allies not getting wind of this. In both cases, initially Hitler was successful. There was a blanket cover of clouds and snow over the Ardennes, and the Allies never knew that the build-up was being made by Hitler, and they never expected it, that he would amass so many tanks for the battle, panzers, and that is the crucial point. The second point was he had decided that he would make a thrust in the American sector, which was weak. Well, Patton, later 4-star general of the US Army, was the man in charge. He was a GOC commanding the American troops there. But credit to him, he didn't panic, he didn't lose his shirt. At the second time, the second thing which happened was that the weather had to hold. When Hitler started his assault, rather the German army on the orders of Hitler started the assault, they found the Americans unprepared, and they went in with a vengeance. But there were some very stupid things which they did. Some of the American POWs were captured were shot dead. This is against the principles of war, and had the Germans just captured them, made them POWs, it was a different story, but they shot them dead, and that hardened the resistance of the Americans. I think in war you must show some chivalry, and this the Wehrmacht didn't show. Then another thing happened was that the weather cleared. The meteorological reports were not 100% accurate, and once the weather cleared and the German and the Allied air forces could move in, they could see that the line of German panzer tanks moving towards Antwerp. The Americans now regrouped, and a counter-assault was mounted, rather a counter-offensive, and after bitter fighting in the new year, the German armies gave up. Von Rundstedt told Hitler that the invasion has been scrapped. Rather, the attack has been scrapped. So, gentlemen, where do we place Hitler as a commander as far as this plan is concerned? I think it is a very ingenious plan, and it showed that you can't judge Hitler by the fact that he was a corporal in the First World War. He was a man who was well read. He had read von Moltke, he has read Friedrichs, he had read Clausewitz, so he was well read as far as the military theory is concerned, and he's certainly not a sepoy or something, or a corporal as people make it out. But at the same time, fortune favors the brave, but in this case it didn't favor the Germans. And the imponderables which Hitler had relied on, particularly the weather, gave way. The skies became clear, and the Germans, who had very little air support, couldn't crack on against the Allied air attacks. And that is the reason the Germans had to give up the fight. Had they succeeded, they would have easily reached Antwerp, captured the port. As I told you, plan was sound, but the execution was not up to the mark, and at a number of places the Germans were stalled. Like at Strasbourg, the Americans put up a very good fight once they came to know that some of their colleagues who had been captured, the Germans, had been shot dead. You don't do that in war. So when the American commander got a note from the German commander to surrender, he had only one word: nuts. Well, Americans fought well, but they had preponderance of manpower, air support, and so the invasion, which had been planned by Hitler, ground into dust. After that, it had to be a one-way down the hill, a roller coaster ride down the hill for the Wehrmacht. And with the Russians pressing away and crossing into Germany, it was all over bar the shouting. Well, gentlemen, this battle is important, because we can study the mind of Hitler, that right up to the end of 1944 he was alert and the principles of war were followed by him. But then you can't have the cake and eat it too. He couldn't control the weather, and that's where he went wrong. And another thing which happened was that the German army got slowed down in its assault. They had expected that they would move faster, which they didn't. That was because the weather had cleared and they were now subject to strafing and attacking by the American Air Force and the US Air Force. So gentlemen, once Rundstedt informs Hitler that the battle has been called off, the offensive has been called off, the Battle of the Bulge died away, and it remains as an example of the preponderance of American might in this war. After that, of course, we all know what happened. I'll close now, gentlemen, on this short video. I hope you like it. Share it with your friends. Come back. I'll give you some more interesting topics. And do subscribe to my channel, share it, and God bless. Look after yourself.